about this because Americans must know how the Chinese Communist Party is poisoning the well of our higher education institutions for its own ends, and how those actions degrade our freedoms and American national security. If we don't educate ourselves, if we're not honest about what's taking place, we'll get schooled by Beijing. Because on places like this campus, scientists have pioneered quantum computing, artificial intelligence, pediatric technology, even autonomous robots that can function without human control. And I must say that frightens me just a bit. Look, the Chinese Communist Party knows it can never match our innovation. It has state-owned enterprise. It's an authoritarian regime. It is a government-centric focus. It's why it sends 400,000 students a year to the United States of America to study. 400,000 students a year studying in our universities come from one country. It is no accident. Now let's be clear. I want to be sure that my language is precise today. When I say China, I'm talking about the Chinese Communist Party. I love and value, as we all do, our Chinese American community and the Chinese people that live here in the United States and those that live in China as well. We want good things for them. Professor Fei-Ling Wang is with us here today. Professor, I didn't see you sitting where? Welcome. Nice to see you. Several years ago, Professor Wang took a trip to China where he was scooped up by security agents inside of China. He was held in a secret location for 2 weeks. Professor Wang was interrogated and threatened. They wanted information about his research about China and his time teaching at my alma mater, West Point. He could tell you the stories better than I could, but they thought they could intimidate him or perhaps recruit him because he's ethnically Chinese. It's a blessing he's here with us today, and thankfully he was released after pressure from the leadership, lots of places, including this very university and the Carter Center. The Chinese Communist Party deploys dollars just as much as it does cloaks and daggers to get its hands on valuable knowledge. There are many American scholars, often doing research funded by American taxpayers, that have been lured into the Chinese Communist Party's talent recruitment programs. The CCP pays them what is for them a fortune to do research related to their current fields for or in China, and then often uses the fruits of their brainpower to build its military strength. A researcher from my home state of Kansas was caught up in this trap, as was the Harvard chemistry department head. Think about that. The Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, recently described the CCP strategy as rob, replicate, and replace. But I want to add another R to the D&I's list. I want to add repress. Well, at Princeton, just this year, students in a Chinese politics class were forced to use code names on their work, lest the CCP discover their identities and prosecute them for free expression of views on Hong Kong and the CCP under its draconian new national security law. That's right here. This happened right here in the United States of America. American students talk about safe spaces as shelter from ideas they dislike. Chinese students need safe spaces to learn of the ideas that they love. What a stark contrast. Students from China at American universities also live in fear that their families back home will be arrested, will be interrogated, tortured, or worse because of the things they say in an American classroom. But look, the CCP doesn't just target Chinese nationals. They want to influence American students as well. Professors and administrators too. Look, they know that left-leaning college campuses are rife with anti-Americanism and present easy targets for their anti-American messaging. That's why they planted Confucius Institutes on our campuses. And under President Trump, our State Department has made very clear these Confucius Institutes are literally up to no good. Many have gone away. Many campuses have seen that, and they've chosen to close down these institutes. But right here in Georgia, Wesleyan College still has one in Macon. Look, it's why there are groups on campuses called Chinese Student Scholars Association here too. They're directed and almost always funded by the Chinese embassy or a local Chinese consulate. Its purpose, to keep tabs on students and to press pro-Beijing causes. Now, you would think at freedom-loving places like Georgia Tech and institutions and scholars all across the world, administrators, school faculty would be more up in arms about the Chinese Communist Party's outright theft and flagrant violation of freedoms that I've described. But we see it too seldom. Well, why? Why do schools censor themselves? They often do it out of fear of offending China. Indeed, I must tell you that MIT wasn't interested in having me to their campus to give this exact set of remarks. President Raphael Reif implied that my arguments might insult their ethnic Chinese students and professors. But of course, nothing could be further from the truth. Those are the very people that this set of remarks is intended to protect their freedoms. And I must say that yielding to the objection of hurt feelings plays right into the Chinese Communist Party's hands. They watch America closely. It's what the party says constantly in response to legitimate criticism around the world. You can see it. And how would the party know how the Chinese people feel anyway, as no one ever gets to vote? Look, we can't let the CCP weaponize political correctness against American liberties. We have to protect and preserve them. Fraudulent cries of racism or xenophobia should never drown out a candid exposure of the activities of the Chinese Communist Party. Let me tell you about Vera Zhou. She's a permanent resident of the United States of America. She's originally from China and a senior at the University of Washington. In October of 2017, so just on 3 years ago, she returned to China to visit her father. Local authorities put her in a re-education camp. A re-education camp for 5 months and under house arrest for 18 months after using a virtual private network connection to connect to her school's website. Something many of you are doing even as I speak. Back here, we saw this. Our State Department team, Vera's mother, Bob Fu, a great friend of the Chinese people, desperately petitioned the University of Washington to advocate for her return. But the University of Washington, a woman named Sarah Castro, the head of the Federal Relations Office, said that the university wouldn't help because of a multi-million-dollar deal with China. Now, thank God, Vera was eventually released and returned to the United States, but no thanks to the University of Washington, and no thanks to the deal that it had made with the Chinese Communist Party. The U.S. Department of Education, over the last years, has found that schools have taken an estimated $1.3 billion from China since 2013. That's just what we know about. Like so many, like Columbia, so many schools that have failed to report the true amounts. What more? What more bad decisions will schools make because they are hooked on Chinese Communist Party cash? What professors will they be able to co-opt or to silence? What theft and espionage will they simply overlook? What business deals will get done as a result of that? Let's do this. Let's carry forward a banner of freedom to defend our schools, what these institutions were built upon. It will aid our national security. And from the central threat of our time, the Chinese Communist Party.